Hi, my name's Holly Engstrom. I'm a PhD student at the University of British Columbia. Thanks so much for coming to this talk. So I'm sure we all remember being asked this question when we were kids. And here are two answers to what you want to be when you grow up from real 11-year-old kids in 1969. So one kid said, I want to be a fireman and I want to put out lots of fires with my men and fire engine. And another kid told us, I want to be a geologist because I now am very interested in stone. And it turns out that these ideas for what you want to be when you grow up actually really matter. So they predict career and school outcomes, even controlling for things like ability. But career and school aren't the only things that kids could have goals about in their future, right? So these same kids, for example, also talked about what relationships they'd want to have. So the fireman kid said, I want to get married and have 2 boys and a dog, and I want it to be a sausage dog. And the geologist kid told us, I'm married to somebody else who is also interested in geology. They also told us about what hobbies they'd want to do. So the fireman kid said, in my spare time, I'm going to teach kids to play football and to swim, and I shall read books of science. Whereas the geologist kid told us nowadays lapidary and stone supplies is the top hobby in America. And I think it's possible that these goals, and maybe others that I haven't listed here, are important for predicting outcomes in the corresponding domains too, or at least predicting what kids decide to spend their time on. And what I'm particularly interested in is how do kids' social class backgrounds affect their goals and expectations for the future? So past research has really focused almost exclusively on career and school goals. And from this work, we know that kids with higher social class backgrounds are more likely to want to go to college and to aspire to higher status careers compared to kids from lower social class backgrounds. But we really don't know anything about how social class might influence kids' expectations for their future relationships or hobbies or other aspects of their lives. And I think one reason for this is the methodology that's been used in past work. So past research has really used 2 approaches. Likert-type measures, where kids just rate on a scale how much they expect some outcomes, like let's say going to college, and open-ended answers, where researchers would code them for constructs that they're interested in. I think these approaches limit what we can learn because the thing is we don't know what we don't know. So if we're missing something important in the way kids are thinking about the future, we wouldn't really know it from these methods because they don't capture differences that we're not looking for. Right? So they usually require top-down input from researchers. So for Likert-type measures, obviously the researchers have to write the Likert-type measure, but even with open-ended coding, researchers typically have to decide what to code for. There are some more bottom-up qualitative coding methods, but these still require human eyes to count words or look for patterns. So you can't totally escape that top-down influence, and they're also really prohibitively time-consuming as data sets become increasingly large. So in our research, we tackled this using a large data set of children's essays, the ones I got those quotes from in the beginning, where the kids imagine their future as adults. And we use an unsupervised machine learning algorithm to identify topics in those essays, using this great package in R called STM. To understand what this algorithm does, you can kind of think of it like exploratory factor analysis, except instead of looking for factors, so sets of items whose responses are correlated between people, it's looking for topics or sets of words that are correlated within essays. And like EFA, we don't specify in advance what the topics will be or how the topics will relate to each other. And the data we have is from this UK National Child Development Study, which is this amazing data set that follows over 17,000 people born in 1 week in 1958 in the UK, about 50-50 male-female. And at age 11, so in 1969, the participants had 30 minutes to write an essay in response to this prompt. So imagine you're now 25 years old, write about your life, interests, home life, and so on. So here's the full essay that I showed you at the beginning of the talk. So this is the kid who wants to be a fireman. And they want to put out lots of fires with my men and fire engine. Also want to be a footballer because I'm interested in football. I want to be rich and get married and have 2 boys and a house in the country, buy lots of food and lots of cloth. I want to live in a big house with a swimming pool and a dog. And I want it to be a sausage dog. And I want to be a manager of a great big factory before I will go to college. And in my spare time, I'm going to go learn people to play football and to swim. And I shall read books of science. And here's the other one of the kid that I showed you at the beginning, the geologist wannabe. So when I grow up, I want to be a geologist because I'm now very interested in stone. If I do not become a qualified geologist, I will still know about stones. They go on to say they're going to start a shop, and they tell us a little bit about robberies of stones, which is kind of interesting, and all the different various geology tools that they're going to have. And of course, they're married to someone else interested in geology to make it easier for their work. So, like I said before, the STM model identifies topics based on words that tend to co-occur. So each word has some association with each topic, kind of like a factor loading. And then based on each word in an essay, we can score that essay for what proportion of it belongs to each topic. So then when we actually ran the model, here's an example of one topic that we found. So the thing about this unsupervised machine learning approach is that the machine tells you, hey, there's a topic here, here are some words that represent that topic, but it's up to you as a researcher to figure out what is that topic, like what does it actually represent. For this one, it was really straightforward. So it's clearly about being a pro footballer, aka soccer player. Seems like that is an extremely popular dream among little British kids in 1969. So here's some of the words associated with the topic. So play, team, football. And here's an excerpt from the essay that had essays that had the highest proportion of this topic. So this top essay was 91% about being a pro football player, and the other 9% would be split between all the other topics we have. So this kid who's the captain at West Ham United. And then the second one is the second highest proportion that we saw of this topic. I love this kid's descriptive imagery, the crowd roaring at the stands. It's awesome. And then here's another topic. So this one's a little bit less clear, but seem to generally be about money, jobs, and plans. So you can see the top words: money, job, might, hope, buy. And then here's some the top essays with the largest proportion of this topic. So when you get your job, you have to get up early to be in time or you'll get sacked. It's important to know. It's also important to note that you're going to make more money than your wife. Another kid tells us, hope I'll get good pay, have lodgings, get a car, and then I'll get a better job, and then I can send my money every week, which is very sweet. So in total, our model came up with 13 topics as the best fitting model. And you can see there's a pretty wide variety of topics. So some of these are SES related, like the ones that past research has focused on, so higher education, money, jobs, and plans. Others had to do with family, so describing your family, talking about doing chores, caring for your family, talking about marriage. Others were about daily obligations, so things like how would you plan out a budget and get enough money to pay your bills, what chores would you be doing, what would your routines be. And others are about material desires, so having a nice house and car, or maybe buying a big farm with lots of horses and farm animals. Again, remember, these are kids in 1969 England, so ponies are very high on the priority list. So the question that we want to answer is, do these topics differ based on social class? And the main way that we measure social class is through the father's occupation. So at the same year when the kids wrote their essays, the dads reported their occupations, and then coders from the National Child Development Survey read those and coded them into these 5 categories. They also provide a bunch of different ways of categorizing the occupations. Our analyses look the same regardless of what method we use. So what I'll show you here is the topics and then the standardized effect size for social class. So if the bar is going to the left, it's more common among kids whose fathers have lower class jobs. And if it's going to the right, it's more common among kids whose fathers have higher class jobs. And then I ordered the bars by size. So you can see, for example, talking about higher education has the strongest positive association with social class. And these patterns, and all the ones I'll show you today, hold controlling for gender, which we tested because some of these topics are things that boys and girls in 1969 talked about to very different degrees. And they also hold controlling for these kids' teachers' ratings of the kids' verbal abilities. So we know that if one group of kids isn't mentioning a particular topic, it's not because they don't have the vocabulary to do so or something like that. So if we look at just the topics related to SES, you can see high SES kids talking more about education, consistent with past work. So that's kind of reassuring that this method shows some validity, lining up with past research. But working class kids are talking much more about money itself. So how they'll get a job to earn money, what they'll do with that money, and so on. And past work has really only focused on education and career aspirations, not so much how kids actually think they'll navigate money, jobs, bills, so those everyday realities. As well, every single theme that talks about family, So describing family, marriage, talking about caring for your family, these are all more common among kids from lower class backgrounds. And this focus on family is consistent with some past work on adults that suggests that people from lower class backgrounds tend to be more interdependent, so focusing on fitting in, fulfilling social roles, compared to those from upper class backgrounds who tend to be more independent, so focusing on their own unique identity, maybe separate from their family. Similarly, it seems like working class kids are imagining their future more in terms of what they'll have to do day to day, so their routines, their chores, how they'll plan to make enough money. Whereas upper class kids are thinking about what they might want to have, so their car, their house, their farm animals. And again, here, I think the fact that working class kids are imagining their future more in terms of roles and daily obligations, whereas upper class kids are imagining the things they might want, I think that's in line with that idea of interdependence being more prevalent in working class contexts compared to higher class contexts. So we wondered, is any of this just some kind of a fluke, right? We're looking at just one data set, just one SES measure. So we also looked at the maternal grandmother's social class, so the occupation of the mom's dad when the mom finished high school. And this is correlated a little with father's occupation, but I think provides a stronger test of this idea that social class could influence the way kids imagine their future. Because I think this measure reflects a more long-standing kind of cultural effect of social class. It also has the advantage of allowing us to include social class information about the mother's family at a time when many mothers were not employed outside the home. And I think these findings are pretty remarkable. So when we look at grandfather and father social class as simultaneous predictors in one model, they seem to have basically the same effects and they're independent of each other. So regardless of your dad's social class, your grandfather's social class is related to how you picture your future, and it's related in basically the exact same ways. So this gives us a lot more confidence that the patterns we're seeing here are reliable. So I started out this talk by showing you this figure, and I think these findings start to help us deal with some of these question marks. So first off, we replicated past findings where upper class kids focused more on education, suggesting this is a valid method. But we also uncovered new findings with lower class kids thinking more about money and specific jobs and plans. We also found differences in relationship goals and other goals and expectations, with lower class kids focusing more on family and daily obligations, higher class kids focusing more on the material possessions. I think that supports research showing lower class contexts foster interdependence, upper class contexts foster independence. And I think this shows it's important to consider the assumptions that we might make, especially as people within the university context, when we're interacting with young people, thinking about what we assume they might want in life or what they should be focusing on. Because we know that institutions like universities often privilege this independent mindset. So privilege the idea of focusing on exclusively your own goals and unique identity. And that can then shut out kids from working class backgrounds and make them feel like they don't belong. The next thing that we're hoping to do in this data, which is such an amazingly rich source of information, is to look at whether my initial assumption is actually true. So are these goals and imagined futures important, right? Do they actually predict the kids' eventual outcomes? Because these participants are now 64 years old and they're still doing that same study. So we know a ton about them and we can test whether the topics they focused on in those essays at 11 actually predict whether or not they went to college, whether or not they got married, whether or not they had kids, whether or not they actually got that sausage dog, and so on. So thank you all so much for listening, and thanks so much to my collaborators, my lab at UBC, and please feel free to contact us if you have any questions or thoughts on the research. Have a good day.